And I'll announce it at the end, but of course, this is, as my email said, this is our last class until after Shavuos. So we will resume, God willing, on June 19th, when I will be, God willing, back in Israel and joining you from my home there. So it's nice to have the technology to be able to just go with you wherever I am. So it's great. We'll start with the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Okay, Hashem should hear our prayers, and all of our learning today should be in the merit of a refuah shlema for everybody who has been injured mentally, physically, an aliyah for the neshamas of those who have been killed, and of course for not bring them home. I really have a problem with that slogan, let them go, of all of our hostages being released. And as the world has their new slogan of all eyes on Rafah, some of those say, great, if all your eyes are on Rafah, then look for our hostages and let them go. So that's what the eyes on Rafah should be about. So we will start with our blessing for our learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Since we will not be together next week, I wanted to take the opportunity to do some preparation for us, spiritually inspiration about the holiday of Shavuot, but specifically about Ruth. And as you saw from my email, our theme today is Holy Chutzpah. And this is based on the writings of a wonderful book, Sefer, that is called The Call of Sinai, by Rabbi Emanuel Bernstein. So that's where much of what we're going to be talking about today is coming from the Call of Sinai. So that's what I'd like to talk about. So the question is, what is chutzpah? And it seems to be, we always talk about the Jews have chutzpah. It's associated with being a stiff-necked nation. And what does it mean to have holy chutzpah? So interestingly, in Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, we have two contradictory statements that are going to inform our conversation. So the first is, it says that, oh wait, where did that go? I'm so sorry. Already lost it. In Mishnah chapter 5, verse 24, which is, let's see, we're getting close to that in our study of Pirkei Avot during the time between Pesach and Shavuot. There is a saying that says the brazen, or the person who has chutzpah, is going to Gehenna. Gehenna basically means like is going to hell. Okay, so it says, and the word is an az panim. Az from the word oz, which means like strong faced. Panim, like a strong faced one, which is basically that's what chutzpah is described as, how it's defined. And az panim legehenna, a brazen faced person is going to Gehenna. And then in just the Mishnah right beforehand, it says Yehuda ben Tema says, be bold as a leopard. And the same word is used, az. Have az kanamer. You should be az. Like this word az, the way it was just used here, az panim. In this case, you should be bold as a leopard, light as an eagle, swift as a deer, and strong as a lion to carry out the will of your Father in heaven. So the question is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's the exact same word. And so we understand, and we're going to learn, like, what is the difference and how do we use this quality, which is very, very challenging, because this kind of strength can kind of turn, and if it's misdirected. So this is the word we're going to use, and it's spelled Ayin Zayin. Marcia, did you have a question?
No, I was going to say it depends on the situation.
For sure, it depends on the situation, and it depends on how it is used. So this kind
Right.
of boldness and this kind of
Say,
so that's what we're going to use. That's what we're going to say, because on one hand, it says it's very clear that a person who has chutzpah is going to Gehenna. And on the other hand, you're supposed to have chutzpah to serve God. So what does that mean? And what does it mean to serve God? Because usually people who have chutzpah will claim that they are serving God. It's, it's not personal. It's the principle of the thing. And then they proceed to use whatever quality they're using in a way that's inappropriate. So what we want to know is, and what does this have to do with Ruth? And even more so, what is it going to have to do with King David? Because one of the names that Ruth has is she's called an Ima Shel Malchut. She's the mother of royalty. And while we know that that is a genetic reality, that it's her great grandson David, who is the king of the Jewish people and will be the ancestor of Mashiach as well, Mashiach ben David, the Messiah, who will be the son of David, it's much more than just the fact that they are biologically related. There is something about Ruth that she fixes and uses in a way that redeems the quality of chutzpah to make it into something that is then used and given to King David as one of his powers, one of the things that he had, one of the qualities that he has, and that we, as the Jewish people, are also supposed to have. So let's talk about this chutzpah. So what's the chutzpah? We're going to take a verse from Tehillim, from Psalms. Psalm 89, verse 21, there is a phrase that says, Matzati David Avdi. I found my servant David. It says, I found him. Where did I find him? So in the Midrash, it says, in Bereshit Rabbah, it says, where did I find David? Where was David found? Does anybody want to know where was King David found? What is the commentary on this? Has anybody heard this before? Where was David found?
He was a shepherd.
He was a shepherd. So you can say, I found him. Where was he found? I found him with the sheep. I found with the shepherd. That would be a very logical, reasonable answer. That's what we would expect. But what does Midrash Rabbah in fact tell us? Something very surprising. It says, I found him in Sodom. I found my servant David in Sodom. It's like, why would his servant be found in Sodom? Who is in Sodom?
His grandmother.
His great grandmother, Ruth. And it's like, was Ruth from Sodom? It says Ruth was a Moabite. So he could have said, I found him in Ruth. I found him with the Moabite land. But it goes all the way back. It's like, why bring up bad news? It's like, why bring up the fact that it was in Sodom that David was found? It's like, you have to remind me of that skeleton in the closet. What do you mean you found me there? That means that the quality that David has was found in Sodom. It's like, that wasn't exactly the greatest place to be finding a quality that you would want. It says, exactly in Sodom was this quality of chutzpah. It's like, what's the chutzpah that was in Sodom? It says, well, the chutzpah goes all the way back. So you can go into your Chumash if you have. And we go back to Bereshit. And we get to Sodom, the quality of Sodom. And sorry, we're having some construction being done here. So I'm sorry, it's a little loud here. Let's take it. And we want to go to Parshas Va'era. With the story of Sodom, as you know, that Lot chose to live in Sodom, bad decision. The destruction of Sodom, Lot is saved. He's saved with his daughters. They go into a cave, and his daughters think that that's the end of humanity. And so they ply their father with wine. They have relations with him, and they conceive. The first sister who conceives, and it says here, this is chapter 19, verse 37 or verse 36, thus Lot's two daughters conceived from their father. The older one bore a son, and she called his name Moab. Moab meaning from my father. It says, like, that's so audacious. That's so chutzpah. It's like, why are you calling him that? Call him, like the next sister called her son Ammon, which means from my people. You could have something that's like, it's like saying, I committed incest. It's like you're calling your child incest. It's like, why would you do that? So that's considered audacious. That's chutzpah. says that the land of Sodom itself was a chutzpahdik place, that they made acts of kindness illegal and they made cruelty legal. Says that's audacious, that's chutzpahdik. How dare you do that? If you want to be evil, not saying that's good, but at least don't be so chutzpahdik that you try to say that that which is wrong is right, that which is cruel is kind, and kindness is cruel. Says that they were so twisted and they had such audacity. Says that that was Sodom. The place itself bred that kind of audacity, bred that kind of chutzpahdickness, which is one of the reasons why God destroyed it. Says it's one thing if people are doing bad things, but if you don't even have any shame about it and you make it into a mitzvah, you make your crime into a mitzvah, then there's no hope for you because there's no reason why you would ever do teshuvah. There's no reason why you would ever change. And so God is like, enough of this. This has to be destroyed. So here is this Moab, and you'd think, what in the world in Sodom is worthy of saying, oh, where did I find King David? Where did I find him? I found him in Sodom. It's like, what did you find? It says, I found this quality of audacity. And this quality of audacity, like all qualities, has, as Etta said, it has its time and its place, and it has its application. The Jewish people have to be audacious. I don't think that needs an explanation in today's world. We need to be audacious. We need to have chutzpah. What does it mean? It means to stand up and be opposing that which is around you. The ability to be bold and not care what other people are thinking. Now, sometimes you are supposed to care what other people think. And then there's sometimes where you don't care what other people think. You just have to do what you have to do. And this is a very important quality that is lacking. It's like we need inspiration in audacity. We need inspiration in chutzpahdickness. And this was the quality that David got. And where did he get it? He said, so to get audacity in and of itself is no great accomplishment. To get audacity and transform it into something that is heavenly, that is regal, that is royalty, that was done by Ruth. What else did the Moabites do? And we know that it was in Abraham's merit that Lot was saved. So Lot has a debt of gratitude to Abraham, to the descendants. And we know when the Jewish people left Egypt, the Moabites wouldn't even give them any bread and water. And that's why a Moabite cannot convert into the Jewish people, cannot join the Jewish people, a male Moabite. Says that was so audacious. And then on top of that, before the Jewish people went into the land of Israel, what did the Moabites do? They sent in their women to seduce the men to try to get them to sin, to raise God's anger, to destroy the Jewish people. It's like, that's chutzpah. It says the Moabites are audacious. And what do we do with that quality? It says Ruth comes and she rectifies, sanctifies the quality of audacity. Where do we see that? It says we see it in her conversation with Naomi. So let's go to that because we often and usually read her beautiful poetic words when Naomi tells her to leave, that she doesn't want them coming with Ruth or Orpah to come back to the land of Israel with her. We usually read it in a very soft, poetic, romantic voice. But we have to understand that this was said in an audacious voice. This was said with some chutzpah. So let's turn to the Ruth. In your Chumash, you will find Ruth at the back of your Chumash on page 1269. Okay, page 1269, chapter 1. After her husband dies and Orpah's husband dies and Elimelech dies, and they are completely impoverished, and Naomi's going to go back to the land of Israel because she heard that the famine was over. What happens? So let's take a look in chapter 1, verse 14. They raised up their voices and wept again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, look, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her God. Go follow your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, Don't urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I'm going. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may Hashem do to me, and more, if anything but death separates me from you. Usually we read it, and your God is my God. Your people are my people. Whither thou goest, I will go. And it sounds very, sweet and romantic. So the words are, but the tone is not. The tone is respectful and chutzpahdik. She goes, I'm going with you. So stop trying to tell me otherwise. I'm going. Because Naomi says, next, it says, when Naomi saw that she, Ruth, was determined to go with her, she stopped arguing with her. And what is the word that it says that she saw that she was determined? Vatera. Vatera. And she saw ki mit ametzet he, that she was mit ametzet. The root of that word is ametz, like chazak ve'ametz. The ametz koach, to be ametz, ometz means to be strong and determined. It's not just like, oh, I will go where you go. Your God will be my God. And where you stay, I will stay. It's like, I'm going with you. She didn't tell her to shut up, but she basically said in a nice, kind, and respectful way, which is what this holy chutzpah does require, is it is still respectful, but it is determined, and it will not accept any excuses or any obstacles. Because it says that each of those things that Ruth said, I'm going where you're going, were in response really to Naomi saying to her, what are you coming with me for? I don't have any children. There's not going to be a marriage. You're not going to have finances. No one's going to like you. Everyone's going to treat you, as if you don't belong. You're going to be a stranger in a strange life. All of these arguments and everything that Ruth says is in response to Naomi trying to stop her. Says, what is this audacity? This audacity is, I want to have a relationship with you, Naomi, and with Hashem and with the Jewish people, even if they don't like me. You hear people who leave their shuls because the people weren't friendly, or they don't practice Judaism anymore because, they're mad at their rabbi, or, all these things. And Ruth is saying, I don't care about any of that. I want you, Naomi, and I want God. I want the Jewish people. I want the land of Israel. This is not exactly like a nefesh b'nefesh, advertisement. Come join the Jewish people. We'll make it easy for you. Naomi's saying, don't come. It's going to be terrible. And she's like, I'm coming. Don't come. They're not going to like you. I don't care. I'm coming. Don't come. No one will marry you. I don't care. I'm coming. I don't know if it's like reverse psychology or what, but this is to be chutzpahdik. And it says this audacity is what Ruth brings. She corrects her Moabite audacity and trains it and triggers it and focuses on the correct things in life, which is then following what Pirkei Avot says, which is be bold, have this approach in serving Hashem. What does this look like in our own lives? It looks like doing things when other people are giving us grief. What are you doing that for? If you take on, I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to take on a new aspect of religious observance and see the flack you get from friends and family and other people of like, what are you doing that for? So now you're so super holy. And like, what's that supposed to mean? I remember when I started covering my hair, someone said like, what's that supposed to mean? I'm like, what do you mean what's supposed to mean? It's called observing the mitzvahs. What do you mean? What does that mean? So people always have a comment. And sometimes it's the snide, sarcastic, whatever comments from those who are nearest and dearest to us that are the biggest obstacles. And again, we are supposed to be respectful, but it's like, I'm sorry you don't like it. I'm sorry it bothers you. I'm sorry it whatever, but I'm going ahead. And we need a little bit of Ruth. It's like, I kind of don't really care what you have to say about it. It's not what's determining what I do. So to be able to have that focus, like the leopard, because it says be bold as a leopard. Why is it a leopard? It says, does a leopard really care what the prey thinks of it? It's like, I'm sorry, it's time to hunt. You're the prey, I'm going after you. It doesn't say like, oh, it's not a good day. I think I'll sit on the couch. I think I'll wait till another time. It's like, no, get up and go. And it's built into its essence. says, be bold as a leopard to serve Hashem. Be bold like Ruth to follow in the path of Hashem, to get close, to do what you need to do. It says, and this is what King David took in this quality, but it is due to Ruth. She is the one who fixes it. She's the one who brings us as a wife. She's called the mother of royalty, not just because he was my great grandson, but he took from me what I was able to fix from Sodom. And in the Tehillim, it says, where did I find David? I found him in Sodom. I found that quality, which means that that was the quality that he mastered. And it took King David, what he had to do in order to be king is he had to put up with every obstacle there was, from his own father-in-law, King Saul, who was trying to kill him, from his wife, Michal, who wasn't so excited about how he danced, in celebration of serving God. People who thought because he was a descendant of Ruth that he wasn't really meant to be king. He dealt with traitors inside and outside of his family, a rebellion by his own son. Rape and death, all of these things happened to King David. It's like, how do you keep going forward? It's like, you have to have chutzpah. You have to be able to keep going forward. And this is what he was able to do. Ruth, thank God, was the person who, in her own quiet way, did she know she was creating royalty? I don't think so. I think you do what you have to do for your own self, and then you find out later what the ramifications were. So just in that, I want to back up from our story last week from when I spoke about Yehuda Alon, the Israeli farmer soldier. When I told my sister in Israel, she goes, oh, Yehuda Alon. I have a picture of him, which she sent me when he was like in second grade, because he was in the same class as my niece, Rivka. And she's like, oh, such a nice family. His mother was an English teacher, which is why his English was so good, which is why he was able to come and speak convincingly to an American audience. And Yehuda's father, who sadly is no longer alive, he was the one who got me a job teaching English at a college in Eilat. So I thought, this is an act of chesed that Yehuda's father did for my sister. I knew nothing about this whatsoever. And here I find myself, I don't even know why, inclined and wanting to help Yehuda and the other farmers. I thought, these are the seeds of chesed. You do a kindness and you don't know how that's going to play out. Kind of, why did Hashem put that in my head? I've heard other speakers who wanted, money for different wonderful causes. And honestly, I didn't really do anything about it. I'm like, that is a really good cause. And I gave my little $18 or whatever I did, and that was it. Like, why did I feel like compelled to write a letter, send it out, and then Carol sent it out, and Etta sent it out, and all these people sent it out. Rabbi Halpern sent it out. I'm like, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. So I just wanted to share that every once in a while you get to see the results. And the only reason I told my sister about it was because she had posted something on our family WhatsApp about the same problem. Like, oh, well, we heard Yehuda Alon. Like, oh, Yehuda Alon? I know him. So the world is interconnected. The things we do make a difference. And if we're so privileged to be able to see how we can connect the dots, it's very exciting. It was very exciting to be able to see that. So Ruth set something in motion that is then played out in King David, and not just in King David, but then will be an aspect of Mashiach as well. But it is also for us. It is not just for that line. It is part of the redemptive process. Is the Jewish people need to get on to the chutzpah bandwagon. Not that we're not on it already. There's plenty of chutzpah amongst the Jewish people. It's not just always directed in the most appropriate, productive way. We just need to make sure that we are using it in the right way, but we need to really channel that and to do it the way Ruth did and the way King David is like, I don't care what you say. I'm moving forward. Oy, Hashem should just give us just the right chutzpah. We do say at the end of benching, Birkat Hamazon, Hashem owes li'amo yitain, Hashem yivarech et amo v'shalom. Hashem will give us oz, this ayin zayin, this kind of strength, which is associated with this bold kind of strength. Hashem will give us that strength. Hashem ozli amo yitain, Hashem yivarech et amo v'shalom. And from that, Hashem will be able to bless us with peace. So it says, like, we don't tend to think of those going in that order. Oz comes first, and then shalom. It is through the power and the boldness that we will get to the shalom. You can't skip the steps and just hope the shalom is going to miraculously manifest itself. Hashem oz li amo yitain, Hashem will give us strength. So let's go into the Megillah because we're going to see some more of this oz, this kind of boldness. Let's go to Megillat Ruth, again in the back. So this is very interesting. If you take a look at every verse, basically, in the book of Ruth, and the book of Ruth is made up, let's see how many verses are in it. So the first chapter has 22, the second chapter has 23, the third chapter has 18, and the fourth chapter has 22. Altogether, there are 85 verses in Megillat Ruth, which is pretty interesting, but that's kind of short for all the drama that happens. In all of those verses, let's just start at the beginning. Verse 1, if you look in the book of Ruth, even if you don't know Hebrew, if you know the letter Vav, which means and, or it's also a hook, the first word and the first letter of the book of Ruth is Vayehi, starts with a Vav. If you go down to the second verse, Vishem, and the third verse, Vayamat, and the fourth verse, Vayisu, and the fifth verse, Vayamutu, and the next verse, Vatakam, and the next verse, Vatetse, and the eighth verse, Vatomer. You notice a pattern? Every single verse in the book of Ruth, with the exception of 8 verses, and we're going to find out why, every verse starts with a vav. Every verse starts with a vav. Why? If you wrote an English paper like that and started every sentence with an and, you would get it back to correct. It's like, you don't write like that. What does that mean? And. It says that and there tells us a number of things. First of all, the letter Vav is equal to 6. 6 is considered the normal workings of life. 6 days you shall work, the 7th day you shall rest. 6 years of planting and harvesting, the 7th year you rest. 6 directions in a cube, 6 sides, that's like the natural world. It says that this 6 means that all the things that happened with Ruth were all just kind of one thing after the next, a kind of a somewhat natural progression. It was just this, and then this happened, and then this, and then this, and then this. It was just kind of going on. However, she breaks out and transcends what was the natural flow. You could say that Orpah was the natural flow. So that when Naomi tells Orpah, go back to your home, you are a Moabite princess, go back. She goes back to her regular life, regularly scheduled programming. And Ruth takes this natural process and blasts herself out of it in a completely transcendent experience and defies what is going to be, what would have been the natural order of things. So if we look at the entire Megillah of Ruth, there are 77 verses that all start with a Vav, and 8, which is our number of transcendence, which do not. So she represents those 8 verses that don't. That 8ness represents transcending out of the story and launching everything into a miraculous, how did she do that? How did this happen? Why did she do it? A whole other realm. But she was a person, where did she get, what did she do? How did she do this? She did this with 77ness. What's 77ness? The word Oz. Ayin equals 70, Zion equals 7. 77 is Oz, that she had this strength to be able to go through these ordinary progression of events and then launch herself out of it. So she combines the ordinary with the extraordinary and launches herself into this other realm that allows her to bring down kingship, to bring down this majesty into the world that was not there yet, that was there in potential, but she's the one who's able to bring it down to earth. The ability to bring the heavenly down to earth is where we are in our sphere account as well. This week, we are in the week of Yesod. Yesod, we have our mystical tree of life with the different sides. We had Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and now we're in Yesod. Yesod, which is kind of like this vortex. It's like the point where everything flows into Yesod, is the 6th week. It's the 6th sphera that's going to culminate next week into Malchut, which is kingship. But first you have to have Yesod. What does Yesod mean? It means foundation. So if somebody says, oh, it's a tremendous Yesod, it means like it's a foundational piece. But Yesod is associated with the spiritual quality of integrity, doing the right thing at the right time in the right way. Specifically, it's associated with sexual integrity, but all integrity that has to do with resisting the short-term gain, short-term pleasure for the long-term gain. Yesod, it says, is called a tzinor, which means like a, what's the word in English? I can't think of the word. Tzinor is a this, where a pipe. That's what tzinor is, like a pipe that brings everything down to touch earth. It brings it down. So it says where heaven and earth meet, it says that's why it's symbolized by the reproductive organ. It says because what is that really all about? It's about creation of life. It's where you become a creator like God through the power of the sexual reproductive organs. And that place is a powerful place that can be used very incorrectly or very beautifully. It can go way off track or it can be used correctly. Rape versus procreation of creating new life in a holy way. It says that place is where heaven meets earth. It's also represented by the 6th day of creation, which is when humanity was created. The 6th day was the Yesod day. It says until then, everything was just like the background. Like we need to have the trees, we need to have the water, we need to have the skies, we need to have dry land, we need to have all of those things. But where does it come to, like where the rubber meets the road? The 6th day when humanity is created. And once humanity is created, it says that's where heaven touches earth. That's where the purpose of creation is found. It says that is the 6th, that is Yesod. It says Ruth, with all of these 6s, with all of these vavs, she becomes the anchor that anchors this quality of kingship on the ground. So how appropriate it is that the whole 2nd chapter of the book of Ruth is all about her harvesting. It's all about the gleaning and with her in the field, connecting with the land. And how is she connected to the land? It's like, why do we even have the 2nd chapter? You could say it is so boring. The 1st chapter is kind of interesting. We have death, we have dying, we have arguments, I'm going back to the land of Israel. You have all of this stuff that's kind of very dramatic. And then the 2nd chapter, she's plodding along behind Boaz's workers, gleaning. And she's going to this part of the field, and now you can eat some parched corn, and here, take some back for your mother-in-law. You say, like, can you just kind of like move the story along? We kind of get the idea. Let's get to like where she goes down to the field and then sleeps with Boaz, and then they get married. This could have really been, as short as the book of Ruth is, it really could have been wrapped up in 2.5 chapters max. We don't need like all of this. And yet, why do we have this chapter 2, this belabored chapter 2? Is that we learn how Ruth goes into the field. What do we learn that she does? It says that she did everything in the most appropriate way. We already had her grandness demonstrated for us in chapter 1. I'm following you. I'm following God. Your people are my people. You are mine, going to live where you are, and nothing but death will. It's like, okay, we had the drama. So what else do we really need? It says, now we need to see who Ruth is on a day in, day out. How is she in like the everyday moments? Because that's the real test. Chapter 1 was amazing, totally amazing. Chutzpah, great, you pass. But now what about the daily life? How are you in the field? It says that she observed all the halachas. The halachas say that when you're gleaning, you can only pick up 2 stalks at a time. That's a real slow way of getting your food. She did that exactly. It says that she was always properly covered, that she was very modest in how she bent down. I don't know about you, but when I bend down to like pick something off the floor, I'm just usually interested in getting it off the floor. That's it. And squatting down demurely and making sure that my skirt's like covering everything is not necessarily on my mind, but it was on hers. She didn't know she was being watched. And it was actually that, how she saw that Boaz saw how she was, that she was following the halachas of gleaning and the halachas of modesty, and that she just had a very regal presence to her, which was not necessarily how everybody else was behaving in the fields. And that's when he says, who is that? Who is that person? So there's a very interesting saying that says in the Midrash Tanchuma, it says, Hashem does not bestow greatness on a person until he tests that person in a small matter. I want to see how you look. So I remember when I worked for Marjorie Kaplan back in the day, I remember we went out for lunch. I don't know if I was with her or I was actually maybe with the former vice president, but we went out to lunch and I'm like, okay, I know this is like really important, like how you behave at lunch, how you treat the waiters, like your table manners, all these things. So Marjorie may not have been with you, may have been actually with Elaine, but I made the mistake of ordering an egg salad sandwich and I took a bite of it. And as I bit down, like the egg went out the back of the sandwich, like down my hands. I might have done it with you too. Who knows? I didn't learn my lesson. I'm like, not such a nice look. I'm like, okay, like, so what do you do when you spill your soup, when you have the egg salad dripping down your hand? Or when I went out with my husband on our first date and I was so excited, I drank hot chocolate and poured it down my face because I wasn't really judging exactly where the mug was hitting my lips. It's like, these are the moments. And I'm like, I'm not sure what conclusions one draws from any of these things. But they always say that the interview is the formal part. And then you spend time with the person, seeing how they are during coffee and how do they treat the staff and how do they interact with the secretary and all these other things. It's in the small matters that we actually see who a person really is. So even though chapter 1 of Megillat Ruth is the drama, and those are the lines that people can quote and that are quoted, nobody ever quotes chapter 2. And yet it's chapter 2 that really tells the story. Patricia.
You have to tell us what you did when the egg salad came out.
I didn't know what to do first. I was so mortified. I'm like, okay, so put the sandwich down. And then, of course, we were someplace that had cloth napkins, which is great. But then it's like, wipe off your hands and say, oh, excuse me. And then, the more you're trying to like clean it up, it was just so embarrassing. I mean, you can say this was a long time ago and I still remember it quite clearly. So, yeah. So it's these moments that we see like how we are. Yes, Marjorie.
Well, first of all, everyone should know what an ideal employee
Oh,
Ellen was. She was just a delight to work with, and we'll tell stories about that another time. But you say, you talk about the details, Ellen, and I think I might have mentioned this before, but it really makes me crazy when people say the devil's in the details. And I say, oh no, God is in the details.
God is in the details. Absolutely. That's exactly right. God is in the details. God is in the details of halacha. God is in the details of our interactions. Anything that is about an expertise in something is in the details. I told you we're having some work being done here right now. So the man, Sammy, who came to do it, I wanted the caulking done in the kitchen, just between the counter and the wall. And he says, because most people come in and they just kind of like squirt the caulk, wipe it off, and they have like this big blob of whatever. He taped the whole thing and made a fine beaded line. And it looks, I said, I feel like I got a new kitchen. It looks so beautiful. He goes, if you're going to do it, you do it right. It's like the details, and it's perfect. It's like, it's perfect. So it's great to have like a grand statement, to have whatever. And it's not to say that somebody's not wholehearted. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's necessary, but not sufficient. It needs to be proven on the ground, in the field, with the two stalks of grain. And she didn't know people were watching, and she could have pled, what do you want from me? I'm a Moabite stranger. What do I know about halacha? But and who knows, other people may not have been following the halacha, because Boaz notices her and says, who is that person who is conducting herself in that way? And that was the royalty that she demonstrated in the least regal circumstances. Impoverished, you're already walking behind people who are harvesting, you're out in the sun, I'm sure you're schwitzing. I'm thinking in Israel, you're in the fields, at harvest time, is not pleasant. No two ways around it. It was an unpleasant, undignified, difficult, upsetting the circumstance to be in. And there she is conducting herself like royalty. It's like, it's so inspiring. So I think we should read chapter 2 out loud too, instead of just whither thou goest, I will go, because that's all nice and wonderful. But chapter 2 is essential. And that is who Ruth is. And this is royalty. And this is also King David, who was so meticulous in all the details. And you can see it when you read his Psalms. The language, the beauty of the language, the expression, his dignity is so inspiring. And that he conducts himself in such a regal, royal way. So it says, Hashem, like Marjorie said, Hashem is in the details. Hashem is in the field. Hashem is in the shul. Hashem is in all of these places. We always talk about, people that they conduct themselves publicly. They're always, someone's screaming at their children at home and the phone rings. In the olden days when people just picked up the phone and they didn't know who it was who was calling. Hello, it's like all of a sudden they're very nice. It's like, but you were just shrieking your head off to your family members in the house. So it's like, Hashem judges us in the places where we don't think that he's actually looking, which is considered a bigger sense. Like, how dare you think Hashem isn't seeing us? So even in halacha, it says a person who commits a robbery at night in secret is punished more than a person who breaks in during the day. Why? This is because you thought Hashem didn't see you at night. You're only afraid of people, so that's why you went in at night instead of in broad daylight. You're telling me you don't care about people or God. But if you break in at night and in secret, you're telling me you're only afraid of people, and that's worse. So it's like, if you're going to be afraid, then at least be afraid of have equal, but not Hashem under people. So your punishment is actually greater. So Hashem sees us everywhere in all of these situations. The yesod, this integrity is shown in the moments where we are the most stressed. It doesn't take integrity to make it the correct decision in an easy situation. It's by definition in the difficult situation. It's by definition in something where we are torn in different directions. And that is the yesod, that is the foundation. So the creation of humanity on that 6th day is the time when we are given the opportunity in creation to say, now we are here. Heaven has touched earth, and the human beings now exist with this responsibility to be the tzinor, to be, and we say we want to create heaven on earth. That is our goal, is to create heaven on earth. The awareness of God's reality should be manifested in everything we do in every way. It's like in our work ethic, how we're working in the farm, how we're interacting with people, how we're treating everyone. Being Jewish is a 24/7 proposition. And this is what Ruth was able to show, and that is actually the ultimate royalty, is that you bring heaven down to earth, you bring an awareness of Hashem into reality, not just on special occasions, not just on court occasions, not just on Shabbos, not just on the holidays, but every day, all day long. And that's our goal, is to be surrounded with that presence. So this is what Ruth does in order to fix that oath of Sodom, of Lot. She fixes it and passes it down to her great-grandson, who we know she was alive to see him sit on the throne. So it wasn't just like he heard about her, that he knew her and grew up with her. That means, because if he sat on the throne and she was still alive, that's such nachas that she had from her great-grandchild. So can you imagine what she's thinking, like, wow, I never would have thought, having, where I started in the fields of Moab, and now I'm sitting on the throne next to my great-grandson. That's a lot of nachas. So we should all have that kind of nachas. So what else it says that Ruth also fixed? So the other thing that she fixed was she fixed another aspect of Lot that went off track. When Lot first comes on the scene, he is Abraham's student. He is attached to Abraham. So let's just go back, because once we know this, we'll read the text a little differently. So let's go back to, let's see, in Parsha's Lech Lecha, because usually in Lech Lecha, we're focused on Abraham and Sarah because they're the main actors in the Parsha. But let's take a look and see what it says. So this is on page 55, chapter 12, verse 4. It says, so Avram went as Hashem had spoken to him. And then it says, and Lot went with him. Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Avram took his wife Sarai and Lot, his brother's son, and all their wealth that they had amassed and the souls that they had made in Haran. Lot is right there with Sarah. So Lot's father had died. And so he was not only Abraham's adopted son, it was his nephew, at which we know, but he was more than just the family. It says that he was really Avram's protege. He went with him. How do we know he was with him and more than just like a little bit kind of with him, not kind of like just there for the ride? In Hebrew, there are two different words for with. One is aleph taf, like et, and the other is im, aleph ayin mem. So when it says that verse 4 in the Hebrew, I'm sorry, I'll read the English. So Avram went as Hashem had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. So in the Hebrew, it says, Vayelech ito Lot. Ito means with him, and it's based on the aleph taf, ito. He went with him. He was with him. It means that when you are with somebody, it's like when you say, I'm with you. It means I'm with you, heart, soul, we are aligned. That's that kind of with. However, that withness kind of changes. So he learned from Avram, and he was with Avram, but at a certain point, Lot gets impatient. There have been all these wonderful promises made to Avram, and one of the first things that happens when Avram gets into the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, is there's a famine, and Avram has to leave and go down to Egypt, and there things don't go so well. So Lot's already thinking these promises of you should be a great nation, you'll be wealthy, have all these things, it's coming to me. In Hebrew, as they say, zemagia li, it's coming to me, I deserve it. Is not coming exactly how Lot wanted it to come. So what happens is he goes to Egypt, And then when he goes back, it says, hold on, let me find it 1 second. When he leaves, chapter 13, which is on page 59, chapter 13, verse 1. It says, Vayal Avram mi-Mitzrayim, and Abraham went up from Mitzrayim, who himself, V'ishto and his wife, V'chol asher lo, and all that was with him, V'lot imo. And you'll look at the spelling there, and then it changes to ayin mem. And Lot was with him. Physically with him, but not with him anymore. He's getting a little like, this is getting a little bit too drawn out for me. And then soon after we see that Lot was with him, kind of, but then the shepherds start squabbling with each other because Lot decides, this land is going to be ours, mine in the future. So why should I have to muzzle my sheep on other people's land? It's going to be ours. I'm taking it now. And Avram's like, it's not ours yet, and you'll muzzle your sheep. And they wouldn't. He says, so this is when Abraham gives Lot the option to leave and basically tells him, and so now this is going to sound familiar. Verse 8 of chapter 13. So Avram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between me and you, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not all the land before you? Please separate from me. If you go left, then I will go right. And if you go right, then I will go left. Now, what should have Lot's answer been right here? We just read it and say, like, yep, that's what happened. Lot should have said, oh, are you kidding me? I'm so sorry. You are my spiritual leader. I can't separate from you. I need to do teshuvah. I need to change my tune. I need to fix. What was I thinking? That's not what he says. It says, verse 10, so Lot raised his eyes and saw the entire plain of the Jordan, and it was well watered everywhere before Hashem destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Verse 11, so Lot chose for himself the whole plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed from the east, and thus was parted one from his brother. Said that Lot even looked like Abraham. It was his nephew, that they even looked alike. They were aligned, and then he lost it. He went off the path, and then he leaves without really a second thought. And he finds himself Sodom, which means if that's where you look, he didn't say, you know what, Aaron, let me go a little far away. Maybe I just need a little space, but I'll come back and we'll see each other and I'll, take a Torah class with you and we'll study the parsha or something. Nope. He's out of there. He didn't have any qualms about leaving Avram. There's something really wrong. So with the alacrity with which he leaves, who comes to fix that? Ruth. So when Naomi says, leave me, there's nothing for you, the opposite, she's like, I'm not leaving you. And there's nothing you can do. And says, V'dafka ba, and she clung to her. We see no clinging here. We see no clinging. This is like, we are supposed to cling to those who are on the right path. And if we don't, there's really not a part of in between place. The truth is the answer was going to be Abraham or Sodom. And that's the way it was really going to go. Because we'd like to think, oh, I'll just kind of do this middle of the road thing. Middle of the road actually doesn't really work. Middle of the road swerves into off track. There are really only two options. You're either with or you're not. And so we see Lot is the one who goes off. He had all the potential, as it says, he looked like Abraham, and it wasn't just a physical. He had all the opportunity. He learned, he knew, he was the beneficiary of everything that Abraham had to teach him. And away he goes. Which also tells us something else. We cannot blame our upbringing or our surroundings for the decisions we make. Because a person can have the most amazing upbringing, all of the opportunities, and make the wrong choice, like Lot. Or you can be like Ruth, who grew up in the worst place, the worst nation, with the worst people, and you can gain clarity and open your eyes and make the right choice. How do we know there's only two choices? Orpah left, and her descendant was Goliath, was Goliath. Ruth stayed, and her descendant is King David. And we know how that worked out. So like, there's really only two options. It says we are supposed to cling to those who can help show us a way that is clear and on track. And if we separate from them, we're responsible for the results. Lot gets sucked into the sodomite culture, as we know, because when the angels come later and they want to sodomize, the people of Sodom want to sodomize his guests. And what's his wonderful answer? Take my daughters instead and do with them as you wish. It's like, what? That's hospitality? Oh, I must protect my guests. I learned that from Abraham. You always protect your guests. It's like, and your daughters you throw out to the, something got really, really lost. He absorbed his environment, as we all do. The environment that we choose to put ourselves in is the environment that will impact us, regardless of what we may wish, hope, or think. So the environment that Lot put himself into was the environment of Sodom. The environment that Ruth put herself into was the environment of Naomi, of God, Torah, and the land of Israel. And that's what she absorbed. So these are our choices. Why is this brought to us? Because we're going to stand. This book of the book of Ruth is being read to us, or we are reading at the holiday of Shavuot, where we stood on Mount Sinai, or at Mount Sinai, not on Mount Sinai, at the foot of Mount Sinai, and said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do it and we will listen. What does it mean we'll do it? We didn't even know what we were doing. What we were saying is, if it's coming from you, God, I trust it, that it's for my best, and so I will do whatever it says. And then I will learn what it is. But I accept it, I acknowledge it. When Ruth says to Naomi, your God will be God, my God. She'd never been to the land of Israel. This was like her birthright trip. She'd never been there. She'd never been in a Jewish community. She didn't even know what she was actually saying, honestly. But she said, if it's coming from you, Naomi, when I've seen how you live your life, I want that. That's what I'm saying yes to. And I'm buying the entire thing. So we are like Ruth at that moment, as much as we were like with Naomi. Ruth was like Naomi as we were standing at Har Sinai. We said, Na'aseh v'nishma. This is what I want. So we have a tradition that King David was born and died on Shavuot, a most appropriate holiday for him to be attached to is this holiday when we read from the book of Ruth. And I'll just throw in, because we discussed it, I think, last year, is that there are many who say that Eshes Chayil, a woman of valor, was written about Ruth, because Boaz, in a direct quote from the book of Ruth, calls Ruth an Eshes Chayil, a woman of valor. And if you go through Eshes Chayil, each of the verses is a reference to something that happens in the book of Ruth, written by her great-great-grandson, King Solomon. So it was a true tribute to her and others who follow in her path. And we should be blessed even after we read the book of Ruth on Shavuot, that when we read Eshes Chayil, a woman of valor, that we should live up to this woman of holy chutzpah who clinged with all her might to that which was right, demonstrating how anything and everything can be saved, redirected, and used in order to reach the highest heights. We should have Mashiach come, Bimhei Ravi Amenu, right now. Nothing could be more welcome at this point. And in the meantime, cultivating that holy chutzpah from ourselves and the Jewish people, and keeping ourselves connected to the people who are, because I don't know about you, but every day seems like a challenge to stay focused and connected and on the right path, and to not give up and to be bold, because the voices out there, After our class 2 weeks ago about love all the heroes in our world, after we talked about Aden Golan and the booing that Ruth was not, let's see, was Ruth considered a prophetess? It's a good question. I'm not sure. There were 7 women prophetesses. I'm not sure she was one of them. But after we talked about Aden, I couldn't find it again, but I found a clip. She actually rehearsed with her team booing her so that she would be prepared for the booing that was at the incredible booing that was at her dress rehearsal performance in Sweden. And to think about, just like talking about audacity, that there were those who were upset, the anti-Israel crowd that was upset that the concert people were able to use some sort of an anti-booing device to take out the booing on the recording of her performance. And it should have reflected people's anger with Israel in her actual performance. But she practiced with people booing. It's not a technique I ever used, like when I was thank you, Cheryl, when I was training bar and bat mitzvah students. I always would say, just know that everyone out there is supporting you and they're wishing you mazel tov and they just think you're amazing and just go for it. Like, that's a whole other level. Say, just picture everyone out there hates you and thinks that you should rot in whatever. So this is another way to prepare. It's like, in order to be bold, we have to have the right kind of thick skin, the skin thick enough to protect us, but not to dull us. It's a very hard balance to achieve, but that's what we want to achieve, is that holy chutzpah. Hashem oz li'amo yiten, Hashem yivarech et amo v'shalom. Hashem will grant oz, the right kind of strength to the Jewish people, boldness, holy chutzpah, and then Hashem will be able to give us the peace that we so desperately need and want. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Have a wonderful Shavuot. I hope it's meaningful and inspiring, and I will look forward to seeing you all after I'm back in Israel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
So,
Ellen.
holy chutzpah. Come back with examples.
Yeah. Well, we've got it. We've got the right people.
Yeah.
People, it's amazing. People are, in fact, I had this conversation just, if you have to go, that's fine. I remember having this conversation with our son, Benjamin, saying the Jewish people are by nature chutzpahdik. We are stiff-necked and we are chutzpahdik. And we kind of need a challenge in order to channel it in the right way, because otherwise we end up doing things. It's kind of like, I don't know, when you have this kind of power, if you don't have anything to direct it against, it ends up going off track. We did talk about this a while ago when we talked about the kids on one of the teams at Denver Jewish Day School, that they were in some sort of finals, whatever, and the final competition was on Shabbos, and the kids unified and were like, we will not play on Shabbos. And then, meanwhile, none of these kids are Shomer Shabbos. I shouldn't say none. If there's 1 or 2 who were Shomer Shabbos, they weren't. But you tell us we have to perform in Shabbos, and like, we will not perform on Shabbos. It's like, we're a boxing glove looking for a whatever the thing is that you hit. We have to have a something in order to stay fit. So Hashem is making sure that we have something to stay fit.
Oh, yeah, a little bit much.
You'll hear me die, as they say, a little too much. But we do rise to this occasion, but we do need help making sure it stays focused in the right way. All right, everybody. All of our prayers should be answered. I'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Have a great Shabbos. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ellen, hey, Ellen.
Yes.
I don't know if I told you, Rabbi Black announced that he's going to work 1 more year. Did you get that?
I saw it. Emily Hyatt is going to be.
And Emily, yeah, she's going to be a co-senior rabbi along with Elizabeth
My
Sachs,
bat
who is,
mitzvah girl.
I know, she's great. You did great with her, but she's great. Yeah.
She's amazing. She's
Yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful Shabbos, and I'll look forward
Yes.
to